On the 5th of October 1967, Asaba, an Igbo town in today's Delta State, was turned into a graveyard. Thousands of unarmed boys and men were rounded up by the Nigerian military forces and executed in cold blood. It didn't stop in Asaba. The killings continued in nearby towns like Isheagu in Anioma South local government area of Delta State, where even the king became a casualty. Families were shattered, names were erased, children were made orphans, and generations were silenced. The bullets did not just kill people, it killed pride, it killed dignity, and it killed the identity of a once proud Igbo people. They planted fear. They gave birth to what is now known as Igbo denial or identity crisis among the Igbo communities in Delta State. Even today, as the call for the creation of Anioma State grows louder, many sons and daughters of Anioma still whisper or outrightly deny their Igbo identity, afraid of what it might cost them. This is more than history. This is a scar that needs to heal. And to heal, we must first remember. Today on Enu Cultural Forum, we bring to you the testimony of a witness, a person who survived the pogrom that happened in Asaba. We bring to you the voice of Anioma State, who speaks the story of her mother who survived the Nigerian genocidal war against the Igbos, and importantly, our focus, the Asaba pogrom of 1967.
I'm sharing parts of my mother's story from the Biafran War, the Nigerian Civil War, and I'll be reading as her voice. Nigerian troops snuck into Asaba and camped at St. Patrick's College. A series of shell explosions, and my mother suggested we run to her brother's house. Her brother, Oba Madre, one of a few people in Asaba, with a large secure gate. A multitude of people were on the run as well. It was chaos. People were running to different directions. We ran for about 4 miles when we stumbled upon a troop of soldiers in a pickup van. They yelled something in Hausa language, pointed their guns at us, and rounded us up for St. Patrick's. On arrival, it seemed as if the whole Asaba town was there at St. Patrick's. At this point, my mother's state of panic has started showing on her face. She kept scanning the faces of the crowd, maybe hoping to see my second elder sister, Udeka, and my younger brother. They had gone to visit an ill relative. It all felt like a dream, especially when we had spent days and months at St. Patrick's, what we call the civilian camp. Food was rationed, we couldn't wash for days on end. Suddenly, all women and girls were separated from the men. The women were taken to St. Joseph Mission near Nekab, while the men and boys were left at St. Patrick's College. We hadn't seen my brother yet. We hadn't walked a mile when somebody yanked my hand away from my mother's and butted his gun on my buttocks. I winced. I couldn't look the soldier in the eye. "Follow me," he said. My mother pleaded with him to take her instead. He ignored her and dragged me out of a crowd. I didn't think twice. I took off. I ran as fast as I could, even as I prayed that he would not shoot me. He didn't shoot. I ran into what seemed like a forest. I didn't know where I was running to, but I knew I had to escape. After I covered a good distance, I stopped. I was out of breath, but cautious. The explosions were relentless. In spite of the shelling, I ran into a boy and a girl, perhaps siblings, who were so carried away by the sight of a fighting jet that they waved at it in awe. I looked up briefly too, but when I stepped on a corpse, I took off running again. My eyes welled up with tears. There were dozens of dead people across the paths I ran. When I heard a loud chant of Mankumansu, Kashesu, Nyamiri, not wanting to be discovered, I ran to a tree and stood still till the chant subsided. With my eyes still welled up, I noticed an older woman beckoning at me to come. I wiped my eyes to be sure I was seeing a human being. She persisted. I ran to her and she ignored me. And she guided me to a thatched house. The house was filled with women. To my utter surprise, my sister Udeka was there. She said that she left my brother at our relative's place. We clung onto each other, talking loudly. The women told us to be quiet. The largest woman in the room asked us to sit on the floor. I was whispering about how I escaped from a soldier when a rumble of explosions and shelling erupted. I kept quiet. The large woman assured me that I could talk, but not too loudly. With more shelling explosions, everywhere was quiet. Then a shell explosion ripped through the distance, but it had pierced through our roof and landed on the large woman's left hand. Half of her hand was on the floor. The stump that was left of that hand was gushing blood. Instantly, a pool of blood settled around her feet. Two women tore off the edges of their wrapper and tied the bleeding hand. They wrapped the arm firm and held it up. The bleeding reduced but never stopped. That was enough incident to make us decide to find our way to St. Joseph. Wide-eyed, I clung to my sister, even as I whispered to her about how worried our mother must be about my brother. She told me it would be all right. Because we had been hiding, it was decided that we find a way to sneak back to St. Joseph, because if we were caught as escapees, we might be executed. We were barely at St. Joseph premises when a short, chubby woman called my name. Are you not Nwansokka Nsugbe? I didn't answer. They have been dragging your mother and your sister around the whole town, threatening to kill them if they don't find you. A whelp escaped from my mouth, but Udeka placed her hand on my mouth. The lady volunteered to take us to where they were kept with the soldiers watching over them. I hurried to them, but before I could collapse in their arms, three soldiers grabbed me. One slapped me, another slammed his rifle on my breast. So you can run, he said. He cupped my breast with a smack. You can run with these big things, he said, jiggling them. However, another, the tallest of them, told him to stop. He had called him Peter and I was surprised at his reaction. They bragged about how they have had many girls, even those that willingly offer themselves to save their families' lives. But Peter told them to hands off me and my family, that we were his. They teased him about how greedy he was. He wanted 4 women all to himself. He pointed his gun at us and promised to teach us a lesson. Then he walked us to a deserted area. I could hear the screams of women pleading for mercy. Goosebumps spread all over my body, and I remembered why I was bent on escaping. I tried to swallow the pain on their behalf, but a lump of saliva stuck on my throat. That might be my fate, my sister's and my mother's. As he walked us further out of St. Joseph camp, another soldier followed him closely, and they spoke in Hausa. I stared at my sister, Nkonya Aswa, to see if she understood what they were saying. As a teenage bride, Nkonya Aswa had lived in Kaduna with her late husband. She could understand the language and spoke it fluently, but she frowned at me. My mother broke down and pleaded with them to let her see her son before they killed him. My sister acted as an interpreter. Surprisingly, they both said something to each other. Their language this time was not Hausa, as my sister confirmed. It was a strange language. A few minutes into our walk, a truck full of soldiers stopped right in front of us. A spatter of exchanges in Hausa language ensued. Nkonya Aswa's eyes brightened. She asked Peter a question in Hausa, but other soldiers hushed her up. My mother warned her to not get us into further trouble. Nkonya Aswa revealed that the elders of Asaba had called for an end to the violence, and the Nigerian side had invited all men to Obosowe for peace talks. I could have sworn I saw a smile on my mother's face. She called on Onishe, our river goddess, to save us. Nkonya Aswa said that they had asked them to set us free. Nkonya Aswa requested that they set us free since the peace talk was on the way, but the 2 soldiers spat on her face. Peter looked away. They took us back to St. Patrick's College. Then Peter said he had granted my mother's wish to see her son. We were separated as they asked me to be the only one to identify my brother. We looked for hours but could not find him. I was so hungry. I begged Peter to find me something to eat, but he asked me to choose between finding my brother or something to eat. We were heading to the last building that we hadn't searched. I wanted to see how loose his grip was when I took my hand, because I was planning for another escape. He kicked me on my legs and my hunger seemed to have disappeared. My brother was in the last building We entered. He was snoozing in a corner. I screamed as soon as I saw him. We hugged each other, but the soldiers separated us. They took us back to where they left my mother and my sisters, then headed to one of their bays at Umuago. They had forcefully taken the Onyeawa family home, as they did with many other homes. We were shoved into a room and locked up. We were there but lost touch of time. However, Peter was faithful with bringing us food, but we had only a bucket to urine and shit. So most times the stench was unbearable. My mother was the only one allowed to take out the feces. When my sisters and I bled during our periods, our wrappers were soaked with blood. Our bloody wrappers were not the least of our problems. On the day Peter asked us to come out of a room, the air didn't smell fresh. Corpses were littered all over the landscape. I felt a lump of vomit in my throat. Vultures competed with jet planes in the sky, while some vultures hovered, many jabbed at bloated human flesh. We were in a state of confusion and shock, unsure of what Peter wanted to do with us. We were taken back to St. Joseph, where we were told that the call for peace was a ruse to massacre men and boys above the age of 10. I have only 1 minute, so I'll just sum up what I have left. My mother was kidnapped with her family or taken captive by the military man who happens to be my father, because he had seen her and he liked her. And he didn't reveal all of this to them until the war more or less subsided or moved eastward. So at the end of the story, what my mother ended with was that when the Niger Bridge was blown up by Biafrans to prevent the encroaching Nigerian soldiers, it was said that Onishe helped Asaba people to prevent the soldiers from coming back, because for every boat that was crossing, she stopped and beckoned at them to keep coming forward to her, but the boats were sinking, so that the Nigerian soldiers were forced to find another route to the east, but not through Asaba. I think they headed north or south, as she said. So that's the end of my story, and thank you for listening.
Once again, I welcome you to N1 Cultural Forum. If today is your first time of seeing our videos, kindly hit the like and subscribe button and go to our channel. You will find more interesting videos to watch. Enjoy yourself, and thank you for subscribing to N1 Cultural Forum.